Hello. I'm happy to welcome you to the second and the final part of the report on the building of the USS Langley aircraft carrier model. In the first video, we created the base of the model. We assembled the hull, the metal structure, and the beautiful wooden deck. Today, we will begin by finishing the painting of the hull. The first effect I will create using very heavily thinned acrylic paint. I will apply it with a sponge and then gently remove the excess with a cotton pad. Why acrylic, you ask? Because I don't want this effect to be damaged by the following ones, which will be done with enamels. This is a total experiment, but I really like it. I need to find a way to deal with that foam. I'll work it out in the next videos. For now, I'll just have to struggle through it. You have to admit, it actually looks pretty nice, like a piece of metal eaten away by rust. For some time now, I have had some of these products from AK in my small shipyard. I will try them all today. We will start with rust streaks, just a small amount on the model, and then use a dry brush to create the streak. You don't need any thinner unless you overdo it with the paint. Then I will add white streaks from sea salt and some dark streaks to add depth to the previous effects. Wow, I really like it. This will surely not be the last model I've completed using this method. Now we move on to the superstructure elements and all the ship equipment. For now they are simply painted and not very straight parts, which also need a bit of depth. And here, another bottle of the AK series comes to our aid. It's tedious work, but unfortunately necessary. I apply the liquid to specific places, and when it dries, I remove the excess using white spirit. That's what it looks like in this one example. To bring out the depth even more, I apply a very light color using the dry brush technique. This creates a nice highlight, making the details more pronounced. The deck is too clean, so using the same technique, I dirty it with brown oil paint. I will definitely be looking for a new method of weathering the deck. This effect is really easy to apply and doesn't look bad, but I feel like I could push it even further. All right, we have a bit of this done. Maybe now we can combine it with a hull. In the meantime, parts are being created that had to wait their turn. Each part that finds its place on the model brings great joy as the ship is taking shape and we're getting closer to the long-awaited finish. But don't worry, we still have a long way to go. At this stage, I didn't even realize how much work still lay ahead of me. There were 4 cannons like this on the ship. That was all its armament. Do you remember that crooked superstructure part? There was no way I could just glue it, so I used screws. For larger pieces, it's even better than glue, at least for me. The screw heads will, of course, be covered by the next elements of the superstructure. And so I keep adding more and more parts, and when everything is ready, it's time to cover the days and weeks of hard work. Luckily, not with just anything. It's time to join the 2 largest parts of the model and free up some space on the desk. It looks like everything fits together perfectly. Just make sure everything is glued properly. The model will be lifted and turned many times. We don't want anything to happen to this delicate structure. There are still over 100 parts left to attach. Here's one of them. All right, maybe I'll show the model now in all its glory, because so far you've only seen close-ups. Now comes the part I've been worried about from the very beginning of the model build. The USS Langley had stretched nets around the deck, which were probably meant to keep sailors from falling into the water. The problem is that the photo-etched set gives us something that more closely resembles a metal, rigid net. I decided to once again try my hand at 3D modeling. The first thing I made were the mesh supports, which, combined with the copper wire, created a structure that is undoubtedly stronger than the one offered by the photo-etched kit. Okay, the supports are really solid, but it doesn't matter if they aren't firmly attached to the deck. Each of the more than 40 pieces was glued in place and then coated with glue again to make sure nothing will come loose during further work. Our model looks like it's ready to film the next part of Mad Max. We'll fix that in a moment. I stretched the wire along the supports so I can trim them perfectly evenly. I just have to mask the cut areas and voila! This stage is done. And now comes the best part. The nets are printed on a 3D printer as well. It took me quite a while to make sure they weren't perfectly straight, but instead slightly sagged under their own weight. Measuring them and installing everything was definitely not a quick job. Here, I had to achieve accuracy down to 0.5 millimeter. Let's take a closer look at how it appears once a few segments have been installed. Even though the mesh openings are larger than on the original and don't necessarily match the scale perfectly, I think they look more interesting than simple flat panels. The masts and other delicate elements finally find their place on the deck. Once most of the ship's permanent equipment is in place, we can start adding the remaining supplies. I printed some barrels, oars, and chests in various sizes. All these items will enrich our model, giving it a bit of life. Let's make a little mess here. The oars land on the lifeboats, and those end up on the ship. I almost forgot about the other photo-etched elements, like the stairs and ladders. I'm installing the chains. These are not from the kit. When I bought them, they were already black, which really makes things easier. When you see this, it means we're inevitably getting close to the finish. Rigging. Many of us do it by feel. It's hard to find good rigging plans for old ships, and basing it on photos that are decades old isn't easy. I do part of it from photos, and part of the time I rely on other modelers and copy rigging diagrams from modeling forums, from finished models' photos. This is my interpretation of rigging the USS Langley. If you still have not enough ropes, feel free to make some nice coiled mooring lines. We'll place them next to our chests, making the deck even more interesting. Another loose experiment. It still needs a bit of polishing. In the archival photographs of the ship, you can see many ropes stretched along the sides of the hull. I didn't want the model to differ from the original, so I decided to recreate those details as well. I was determined to make them from a rigid material like copper wire, so I could give each line exactly the shape I needed. The rope had to look as if it were hanging under its own weight. Ordinary thread or string would have been unsuitable for that purpose. And as you can see, one or two mooring lines don't make much of an impression. But after adding a few more, they start to look like an integral part of the model. They greatly enrich the ship's sides, turning them into something more than just a flat surface. The final details, and there it is. The model is finished. But that doesn't mean the end of this video. After all, what is an aircraft carrier without airplanes? Here is a fully original model of the Curtiss SOC Seagull aircraft, created entirely by me. The kit includes aircraft models, but after many attempts to assemble them, I realized I simply didn't have the patience for it. That's why I decided to build my own aircraft. All right, you're probably ready to wrap this up, so let's keep it short. The aircraft, of course, required painting. I did this using an airbrush as well as a paintbrush. Sometimes it's better to struggle a bit with a paintbrush than to mask off those tiny surfaces. Like here, for example. A few decals so the models don't look bare. Don't throw away old decals. These numbers, for example, come from a 1 to 35 Willys model. It's time to place the finished aircraft on the deck and to decorate the entire scene with a few details. I wouldn't be myself if I didn't place a crew on the ship. These are my standard figures, which I used for the first time in my D-Day diorama. Also my production. Oh yes, that's much better. And ladies and gentlemen, this is it. I'm really happy. Building this model wasn't easy or quick. Enjoy the view, and I'm off to the next project. Smaller, simpler, something to relax with after such a challenge. Well, hopefully. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.